Starbucks did not lose its edge because people stopped liking coffee. It lost something quieter and more dangerous, the feeling that the store still worked the way customers wanted it to. For years, the financial press and industry analysts have offered a predictable set of reasons for the quiet erosion of the Starbucks empire. They point to inflation. They highlight the rise of independent, hyper-aesthetic specialty coffee shops. They argue that a $7 latte is simply no longer justifiable in a tightening economy. But this is the surface story. It assumes that Starbucks is, at its core, a company that sells coffee. If you look closely at the architecture of the brand over the last 3 decades, you will see a different reality. Starbucks did not conquer the world by roasting better beans than anyone else. It conquered the world by engineering a highly specific, universally reproducible physical experience. It sold a destination. It sold the third place, a concept famously championed by Howard Schultz, representing a sanctuary between home and work. Most people understand the third place as a warm, fuzzy marketing slogan. But inside the company, it was not marketing. It was a rigorous operating doctrine. The third place dictated the lighting. It dictated the exact volume of the jazz or acoustic music playing in the background. It dictated the height of the espresso machines, deliberately kept low so that the barista could make eye contact with the customer. It dictated that the store must smell exclusively of roasted coffee, which is why, for a long time, Starbucks banned its employees from wearing perfume and refused to sell heated breakfast sandwiches. Everything was designed to create a sense of predictable, premium comfort. The customer was paying for the real estate, the atmosphere, and the human connection. The coffee was simply the admission ticket. For a long time, this system was practically invincible. But then, Starbucks became the victim of its own digital competence. To understand why the giant stumbled, we have to look away from the dining room and look behind the counter. We have to look at the hidden system of operations. In the mid-2010s, Starbucks made a strategic decision that was praised by Wall Street as a masterstroke of innovation. They pushed heavily into mobile order and pay, and they leaned aggressively into drive-thrus. Simultaneously, they unlocked infinite customization. Through the app, customers could add cold foam, extra shots, alternative milks, and flavored syrups with the tap of a screen. On paper, this was a massive success. Revenue surged. Digital transactions became the dominant engine of the company's growth. Millions of people downloaded the app, preloaded it with cash, and essentially turned Starbucks into one of the largest unregulated tech banks in the world. But an app is not a physical space, and the digital strategy was quietly going to war with a physical store. When you allow infinite digital customization, you are no longer running an Italian-style espresso bar. You are running a complex chemical manufacturing plant, and you are doing it in a physical footprint that was designed in 1998. Acquired romantic choreography of the barista steaming milk and pouring shots was destroyed. It was replaced by the relentless, chaotic sound of the ticket printer. Baristas were no longer hosts. They became assembly line workers attempting to decode tickets that featured 8 different modifications. Suddenly, a customer who ordered a simple black drip coffee in the store was standing at the counter for 15 minutes. Why? Because the barista was trapped in a backlog of 20 complex mobile-ordered ice drinks that had flooded the system from people who were not even in the building yet. The store stopped feeling like a sanctuary. It started feeling like a crowded, stressful fulfillment center. The lobby, once a place to read a book or meet a friend, became a waiting room for frustrated people staring at their phones, waiting for a cup with a sticker on it. The visual language of the store changed. Instead of a pristine counter, there was a sea of plastic cups filled with brightly colored liquids waiting to be claimed. The connection between the barista and the customer was severed, replaced by a transaction between a smartphone and a printer. Starbucks had successfully optimized the purchase, but in doing so, they had accidentally broken the product. They had assumed that speed and convenience were the only things the modern consumer valued. They forgot that if the physical store feels chaotic, stressful, and slow, the premium illusion shatters. The customer suddenly realizes they are paying $7 for a milkshake in a stressful room. This was the crisis that forced a massive, painful realization inside the highest levels of the company. Marketing campaigns about ethically sourced coffee could not fix this. New seasonal flavors could not fix this. To save the brand, Starbucks had to do something incredibly difficult for a company of its size. It had to admit that its infrastructure was broken. It had to unlearn a decade of digital obsession, and it had to relearn the store. The turnaround could not begin in the marketing department. You cannot advertise your way out of a fundamentally broken physical experience. The leadership realized that to save the soul of the company, they had to treat their cafes not as coffee shops, but as complex logistical bottlenecks that required an industrial engineering solution. The problem was a matter of physics and time. The physical layout of the standard Starbucks espresso bar was designed for a linear era. A customer orders at the register. The ticket slides down the bar. The barista pulls the shot, steams the milk, and hands off the drink. But infinite digital customization destroyed that linearity. A barista was now dealing with cold foam, blonde espresso, 3 pumps of a specific syrup, and oat milk all for a single cup. The physical space was working against them. The ice bins were in the wrong place. The milk refrigerators required the barista to bend down constantly. The blenders were too far from the syrup stations. Consider the mechanics of a blended beverage. Under the old system, a barista had to take roughly 12 distinct steps to make a frappuccino, constantly pivoting away from the counter, turning their back to the customer, and fighting with equipment. When a store is processing hundreds of these highly customized orders an hour, these micro-frictions compound. The result is exhaustion for the worker and delays for the customer. Starbucks had to completely tear down and rebuild the hidden system. They launched what became known internally as the Siren System, a massive multi-billion-dollar overhaul of the equipment and the spatial design behind the counter. This was not about buying shiny espresso machines, it was about reclaiming seconds. Under the new operational doctrine, the physical bar was re-engineered so that the barista rarely had to move their feet. Custom ice dispensers were installed directly above the workstation. Milk stations were elevated. The blenders were integrated into the immediate workflow. The ticket system was overhauled to group hot drinks and cold drinks more intelligently, recognizing that over 70% of Starbucks sales had quietly shifted to cold beverages, a reality the old store layouts had entirely ignored. But here is the most crucial layer of this transformation. The purpose of this extreme efficiency was not to turn the barista into a robot. It was precisely the opposite. By engineering the friction out of the physical assembly of the drink, Starbucks was trying to buy back time. They realized that if a barista is frantically sprinting back and forth to find almond milk, they cannot make eye contact. They cannot remember a regular's name. They cannot provide the premium hospitality that justifies the price of the product. The hidden logic of the turnaround was profound. You have to aggressively automate and optimize the unseen mechanics of the store so that the human element can return to the surface. Efficiency was not the end goal. Efficiency was the currency required to purchase human connection. Yet optimizing the bar was only half the battle. The company still faced the inherent conflict between the digital customer and the physical customer. The customer who orders on the app while sitting at a red light expects a frictionless, hyper-fast transaction. They view Starbucks as a utility. The customer who walks in to sit down with a laptop and a croissant expects atmosphere, peace, and an experience. They view Starbucks as a destination. For years, Starbucks tried to force both of these customers through the exact same physical choke point. The result was that neither customer was satisfied. The digital customer was angry that their drink wasn't ready on the counter, and the cafe customer was angry that the lobby felt like a stressful transit lounge. To resolve this, the brand had to unbundle its own identity. It had to accept that the third place could no longer be a one-size-fits-all model. Starbucks began to fundamentally alter its real estate strategy. They started building purpose-built digital-only pickup locations in dense urban centers. These stores had no seating, no jazz music, and no romantic illusions. They were designed purely for throughput, acting as localized fulfillment nodes for the mobile order and pay system. By routing the purely transactional, high-speed digital traffic to these specialized locations, Starbucks could theoretically remove the pressure from the traditional cafe footprint. They were creating a pressure valve. The strategy was to isolate the utility-driven consumer so that the destination-driven consumer could finally have their third place back. This operational split reveals a deep truth about scaling a premium brand. When a company grows massively, it often acquires different cohorts of customers who are buying the product for completely contradictory reasons. The failure state is trying to serve all of them with the exact same infrastructure. The dominant state is recognizing the contradiction and building parallel systems that protect the core brand experience from being cannibalized by its own growth. But implementing this dual system architecture across tens of thousands of global locations required an immense cultural shift at the executive level. It meant abandoning the intoxicating metric of simple top-line digital revenue growth and looking closer at the eroding foundation of brand equity. It meant admitting that a perfectly optimized digital transaction is worthless if the physical reality of the store makes the customer feel cheapened. This operational split revealed a deep truth about the nature of corporate giant drift. When executives sit in a headquarters thousands of miles away, looking at digital engagement metrics, the company often looks healthier than ever. The dashboards flash green, average revenue per user is up. Transaction times, measured from the moment the app is open to the moment the payment is processed, are down. But a spreadsheet cannot measure the tension in a physical room. It cannot quantify the exhaustion of a barista or the frustration of a customer waiting in a crowded lobby. This is the exact mechanism of giant drift. A company becomes so massively successful and its data becomes so sophisticated that the map replaces the territory. Leadership begins to manage the digital abstraction of the business while quietly ignoring the physical reality of the floor. Starbucks had fallen into the classic trap of the modern mega-corporation. They mistook transactional volume for brand loyalty. They assumed that because people were buying faster and customizing more, they loved the brand more. But speed and customization are ultimately commodities. Anyone can sell caffeine fast. Any fast food chain can add vanilla syrup to a cup of ice. The only competitive moat Starbucks ever truly possessed was the feeling of being inside a Starbucks, and by optimizing for the smartphone, that feeling was dying. For a brief, intoxicating period in the late 2010s, financial analysts argued that Starbucks should be valued like a technology company. After all, their mobile payment ecosystem handled more money than many regional banks. This was a fundamental misunderstanding of physics. A technology company scales with zero marginal cost. A new user downloading a software application does not make the application slower for everyone else. But a new user on the Starbucks app ordering a highly customized, multi-layered cold beverage during the morning rush actively degrades the experience for the physical customer standing in line. Physical space has absolute limits. Human labor has a maximum velocity. The leadership had to recognize a painful reality. Despite the digital wrapping, they were not a software platform. They were a heavy infrastructure, human labor hospitality business. The moment you treat a hospitality business like a tech company, you inevitably begin to treat your employees like processing nodes and your customers like data points. The turning point for the brand was acknowledging that this digital-first trajectory was structurally unsustainable. The crisis was not about the quality of the Arabica beans, it was about operational integrity. When the operations fail, the brand fails. Reversing this kind of operational drift is exceptionally rare in corporate history because it requires a profound level of humility from the executive suite. It is incredibly easy to launch a rebranding campaign. It is easy to hire a premier advertising agency to shoot warm sepia-toned commercials about community, ethical sourcing, and the magic of coffee. But Starbucks leadership realized that you cannot advertise your way out of the broken physical experience. If a customer sees a beautiful advertisement about the romantic third place and then walks into a store that feels like a chaotic, sticky-floored fulfillment center, the advertisement actually backfires. It highlights the gap between the brand's promise and its reality. The marketing becomes a lie. True strategic turnarounds, therefore, are not born in marketing departments. They are born in the unglamorous, grueling work of industrial design, spatial planning, and capacity engineering. Starbucks had to acknowledge that their baristas, their ponters, were unionizing and burning out not because they lacked motivation, but because the corporate system was actively setting them up to fail. You cannot demand premium, warm hospitality from an employee who is fighting a broken layout to fulfill an endless queue of algorithmically generated tickets. Relearning the store meant returning agency and dignity to the barista. It meant redesigning the spatial reality of the counter so that the human beings inside it could actually breathe, look up, and execute their jobs with a sense of control. By pouring billions of dollars into the Siren System, automated inventory tracking, and specialized pickup stores, Starbucks was not just upgrading equipment. They were attempting to repair the social contract between the brand, its workers, and its customers. They had to rebuild the invisible architecture of the store so that the visible experience could feel effortless again. This brings us to the broader underlying framework that governs all physical retail. We live in an era where every brand desperately wants to be an ecosystem. Every retailer wants an app, a loyalty program, and infinite frictionless digital scalability. But if your business relies on a physical interaction, if your product is ultimately handed from one human being to another inside a physical space, then that physical touchpoint is the absolute unyielding ceiling of your brand equity. If the digital engine outpaces the physical infrastructure, the business will inevitably collapse under its own weight. Growth itself becomes toxic. The very mechanism that drives your revenue, in this case, frictionless mobile ordering, becomes the exact mechanism that destroys your core value proposition. The digital ghost haunts the physical machine. To survive, a giant must eventually look away from the screen and look back at the floor. It must remember what it actually sells. Starbucks does not sell coffee. It sells a highly engineered feeling of comfort, predictability, and status. The coffee is just the liquid medium through which that feeling is delivered. This is the ultimate strategic lesson of the coffee giant's crisis and its ongoing evolution. The most powerful structural turnarounds in business do not begin with a new logo, a viral social media pivot, or a clever public relations campaign. They begin with the painful, necessary work of fixing the place where the customer actually feels the brand. A company can have the most sophisticated digital infrastructure in the world, but if the store is broken, the brand is broken. To save its empire, Starbucks had to forget the app and relearn the store. If you want to understand the hidden systems and operational doctrines that truly drive global business beyond the headlines and the hype, make sure to subscribe. We deconstruct the architecture of the world's most powerful companies, one framework at a time. Until next time, look past the product and study the system.